Hello and welcome to this month's, really this week's livecast, but this month's e-newsletter livecast, which is always special because we always have some big news to discuss on these e-newsletter livecasts. And this one is also a little special because I've been out of the country for the last 2 weeks. I've been unable to do this livecast. I appreciate your patience and understanding for that. But I was on vacation in New Zealand with my girlfriend. We were just traveling around, having a wonderful time in New Zealand. And I'm sure that I'll discuss that at different points in this live cast, but that was why I haven't been here for the last couple weeks. As I wait for people to show up, I want to let's see, and I want to make sure I can see comments. I can't always see comments in these videos. Usually I can, but hopefully they will show up. So if you're here, post a quick comment so I can see if I can even see the comments at all. So yeah, I was in New Zealand for the last few weeks, just traveling, mostly pleasure, but I did do a little bit of business, very slight business, where I met with our New Zealand distributor, and the comments just popped up, so it looks like we're all good today. So I met with Pixelpark, which is our New Zealand distributor, down in Christchurch on the South Island. I also visited Counterculture, a board game cafe in Wellington, and Flock, a board game cafe in Nelson, as well as a place called Jake's Hardware, which is a hardware store that also happens to sell board games in Twizel, New Zealand. So I got to see a few different aspects. And our games were in all those places, which was really neat to see that our games were all the way over in New Zealand. Yeah, I'll return to New Zealand in a little bit, but let's see if we have any questions so far, and then I'll, yeah, no questions so far, so I'll keep talking about New Zealand, well, no, let's talk about the Wingspan expansion, because that's what the big focus of today is. So the Wingspan European expansion is now on our web store for pre-order. We made a bunch of copies of this expansion. I did allocate a significant portion of them to distributors and retailers around the world, but I kept some, of course, for you to order from us if you want it directly from us. And we'll start shipping as soon as possible. I've estimated shipping will happen between November 11th and the 22nd. It could, you might get a shipping notification a little bit before then, but that's my initial projection for when shipping for the expansion will happen if you order it today or tomorrow. There's no time frame on the pre-order, but I have a feeling it will sell out fairly quickly based on the pace that I'm seeing of orders so far this morning and just how many I know are available on our web store in general. So yeah, that's the Wingspan expansion. Now we do have, actually, let me grab something off my shelf real quick so I can show you the big thing that we're doing today, in addition to the expansion pre-order, which is the charity auction. Let me grab something real quick. So the charity auction that we're doing this year, we do it every year. We've done it since 2013, and basically we connect with a few bloggers, reviewers, like board game content creators that I really love and that I want to share with other people and that I haven't already featured on the auction. Looks like Elizabeth Hargrave, designer of Wingspan, is also here. And so every year we do this charity auction where I connect with these bloggers and I associate what I think is a really cool item or items with each of these bloggers, the same item, and people can bid on them with the winning bid being matched by Stonemaier Games and then being pledged in full to a charity selected by that content creator. And this year, what people will get if they win one of these 11 auctions is a custom Wingspan box. So you can see this box. This doesn't look like a normal Wingspan box because it was custom printed with this bird on it. So if you win one of these auctions, you'll get a custom copy of Wingspan with birds of your choice from the game, either from the game or the expansion, printed on the cover and then the 4 sides instead of the birds that are normally on there. So you get to choose your custom box. It'll be one of 11 that will exist in the world ever. They'll be completely unique boxes, unique to you. I guess I wouldn't say ever. I guess it's possible we'll do something like this in the future, but I don't anticipate doing that. I think these will be the only copies that ever exist that are unique in this way. Also, you'll get a copy of the Wingspansion, of course, and MeepleSource has pledged to offer to each of the winners a set of all their custom Wingspan tokens that they make. And Fulfillrite, which is a company that handles Kickstarter fulfillment, they're also matching the biggest pledge that's made to any of the 11 auction winners. So if someone ends up bidding $1,000 on one of these items, Fulfillright's going to match that to the charity of choice for that specific auction item. So you can see details of all that in the, I put a link to our e-newsletter in the description above, so you can check that out if you want to check out the auction. And really, if you aren't able to participate in the auction in that way by bidding a lot of money, because these auctions can go up pretty high, there's a demographic survey that I included in this e-newsletter. If you fill out that survey with your information, just so we can learn a little bit more about the people who play our games, we'll donate. Stonemaier Games is going to donate $1 for every person who fills out that survey to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So last year we had about 3,000 people fill out that survey. So hopefully we'll get that amount this year, and we'll donate $3,000 or more, depending on how many people fill it out, to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Let me scroll down and see if there's any questions today in general, and then I'll go back to some of the topics that I was going to discuss. Let's see. Joshua says, curious to see your thoughts on board games' effect on the environment. Is that something you try and keep in mind with your games? Yeah, Joshua, that's a great question. There's actually a couple threads on Board Game Geek about this. One of the main things that we keep in mind, that I try to keep in mind, are elements of games that are disposed of when you open them. So, for example, I hear that a lot of people are concerned about plastics in games. I totally get that. Plastics, like anything that you make in a board game, anything that you make at a factory, is going to put some wear and tear on our environment. But what I'm mostly concerned about are plastics that are disposed of when you open the game, like shrink wrap. If you are disposing of shrink wrap, that is going to, that's being thrown away. And so I want to reduce things like that in our games that are thrown away, that are disposed of, and particularly if they're plastic, because they're not biodegradable. So we are looking into alternatives for shrink wrapping game boxes, which is the toughest thing to do, because shrink wrap protects that box from the elements, which is pretty important to get you a game in pristine condition. But the easier fix that we're looking into is the shrink wrap that goes on decks of cards that are included in the games. So we're looking into solutions for that. Hopefully we'll find some solutions for that in the near future. I thought that we had found one that involved kind of a wax paper strip that would go around cards, but it turns out the ink on the cards was kind of rubbing off due to that strip. So we're still looking into solutions for that. But it is something that I think about quite a bit. Let's see. It looks like one of the artists, Natalia of Wingspan, has joined us today, the lead artist for Wingspan, really. Justy Pekka says, are you prepared for the inevitable situation where the expansion sells out in a few hours and a pitchfork mob arrives at your doorstep? I hope that's not the case, but I hope I also gave people plenty of warning that the expansion could sell out within a day or so, and maybe it won't. Maybe I've made enough copies for retailers and distributors that it won't happen. I think I've made quite a few copies, but we'll see what actually happens. One of the other items, I don't have it in front of me right now, is the Swift Start Pack. This is another thing that we've made very recently to help enhance people's introduction into Wingspan. And so it's this, I wish I had the visual thing in front of me. Basically, it's a pack of 4 instruction guides that walk you through the first, I believe, 4 or 5 turns of the game. Basically the first round of the game. Well, half of the first round. And they just tell you exactly what to do. And to facilitate that, we also printed 10 new bird cards that if you're already on Wingspan, if you already know how to play, you can just shuffle those bird cards into your deck. But if you're teaching Wingspan, those specific bird cards go with specific guides that are in that Swift Start pack. So if you're trying to teach someone Wingspan, you can just give them this guide and give them the specific bird cards indicated in that guide, and the guide will just walk them through their first few turns. This is largely to help people who aren't used to learning game rules as complicated as Wingspan. Not that it's that complicated, but for someone who's new to gaming, it can seem pretty overwhelming, and the guide just tells you what to do. So whether you are teaching Wingspan to people on a regular basis, if you're new to Wingspan, or if you play Wingspan only with people who really know how to play the game, the promo cards can just be added into the game that way. So it's kind of a guide for everybody. We're including it in the latest printing of Wingspan and going forward. But if you already have Wingspan and you want the Swift Start promo pack, it's available on our web store now too. You can get that, and you can kind of get that and the expansion at the same time in the same order to consolidate shipping, which is good for the environment, as Joshua alluded to a few comments ago. Let's see. I see that Paul Solomon is joining us today. I want to give Paul a quick shout out because Paul has a game, I think his first game on Kickstarter right now, and that is Honey Buzz. I'm backing 2 projects right now. There are a lot more that I want to back, but right now I'm just backing the 2. Honey Buzz from Paul and Legacies from Jason Brooks. Both were attendees of the Stonemaier Games Design Day a few months ago and in past years as well. And I'm happy to see both of their games on Kickstarter. So feel free to check out Honey Buzz and Legacies, which are on Kickstarter now, among many other great games. I know Connor is here too with a game on Kickstarter. Other people have games on Kickstarter, but I want to give them a quick shout out. Miles says, welcome back. Looks like you had a great trip to New Zealand. What was your favorite meal? Yeah, Miles, I don't know if you saw my personal blog post yesterday at jamiestegmaier.com, but I posted my 10, or Megan and I, our 10 favorite meal experiences and foods in New Zealand. It's really hard to pick, but I might go with a place called Big Fig in Wanaka, New Zealand. It was just a really good meal. They had this system set up where you could select a small plate, a medium plate, or a big plate, and you just walk down this line and you fill up that plate with different food. And it was just really good, fresh food, really fresh and clean. It felt healthy, even though it probably wasn't completely healthy. And yeah, it was the kind of place where as I was eating it, I was like, I wish this place existed right down my street, because I would go there for lunch every week. That's Big Fig in Wanaka, New Zealand. I think it might be a small chain, so it might be elsewhere in New Zealand too. Tim says, Jamie, do you know roughly how the fulfillment center goes through orders? Is there some consolidation or more or less by order number? More or less by order number, but they look for ways to ship as efficiently as possible. So they might create like today, as they get all these orders, they might create a batch that says of identical orders of all. They might say, okay, we'll make a batch of all Wingspan plus the Swift Start pack, and we'll ship all those together. And then they'll do another batch that's just Wingspan, and or the Wingspan expansion, or they'll do another batch that's Wingspan plus the expansion. So they'll do it in these little mini batches, and the mini batches will be sorted by order number. Daniel says, what's my favorite new bird in the European expansion? That is really, really hard to pick. I love the round end bird cards. There's this new ability in the Wing expansion. Let me see if I can pull out a card here as an example. Actually, here in my Wing expansion box are a bunch of the Wings, the Meeple Source upgrades for Wingspan that look really awesome. I don't have the cards readily available here, but there are these round end abilities that trigger at the end of each round. And I just love getting those abilities early on in the game, so they trigger at the end of each round. And they also give you like goals to do during the round, like gather a certain amount of food on that bird and get a benefit from it, things like that. So I really like getting those round end birds early on in the game and kind of focusing on them. They really change the shape of your strategy if you get them going early in the game. Chad says, has it been hard to get back into the groove of things at Stonemaier Games? Did you have a ton of work waiting for you? In a way, I did. I replied to some emails in New Zealand. I also had help from a friend who was monitoring some of our customer service emails while I was gone. I did come back to about 1,000 emails in my inbox and some important things to do. I've pretty much caught up, but I do have a few other things to catch up on. My sleep has been affected a little bit because of the time zone change. I hardly ever sleep in. Yesterday, I slept in till 8:30. Usually I get up at like 7:30 at the latest. I slept into 8:30. Did not anticipate that happening, but it happened yesterday. So that's impacted me a little bit. But you know, it's when I'm 3 days back home now, and I'm pretty much back in the groove. In those regards, let me get to my chocolate of the day, because I have chocolate from around the world today to feature. We ate a lot of chocolate in New Zealand and brought back some chocolate from New Zealand. And some of our favorite chocolate was from Whittaker's. Hokey Pokey is, I think, a unique New Zealand thing. It's kind of a butterscotch crunch. And whereas we've tried a lot of the Whittaker's, we actually haven't tried this bar yet. You see, it hasn't been opened yet. But I wanted to show it on screen. We have plenty of Whittaker's that we're currently eating. And I think my favorite Whittaker's so far is the roasted Supreme Coffee, which is really, really good. Also, a backer and a fan of Stonemaier, Christian, sent me some chocolate all the way from the Netherlands. So I wanted to thank Christian for doing that and add this to today's chocolate of the day. Hopefully we'll still have some New Zealand chocolate left over last week because we bought so much. So I'll show more of it next week for next week's chocolate of the day. Maxime says, do I plan to make a big box to fit all the Wingspansions? Currently, we don't have a plan for that. I think it's possible in the future, but it literally is not something that we have in the works at all right now. Rod says, any tips on handling long downtime for players when designing a game? Rod, that's a great question. Yeah, I would say that the main thing that I try to do is to remove moving parts that prevent players from planning ahead for their turn. So if I take my turn, then you take your turn. Ideally, nothing you will do on your turn, or a limited number of things that you do on your turn, will prevent me from planning ahead for what I'm going to do on my turn. I think this is in conflict definitely with games with lots of player interaction, because that if there's tons of player interaction, it's really tough for me to plan ahead on my turn. But there are other things that you can do in game design, so especially in games with lower player interaction, to allow players to plan ahead for their turn, basically. And I think that can significantly reduce downtime. Joshua says, can you plug the podcast too? Yes, Joshua, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, so a few months ago, I started uploading these Facebook Live videos to YouTube after I posted them. It's fairly low-res video. And Joshua recently came to me and said, hey, I can actually turn that into a podcast, an audio, just an audio file, and post that on iTunes right now. It might be on other places too. So if you go to our website now, if you prefer the audio version, you just want to listen to this maybe on your drive to work or something in the future, just the audio version, not the visual version, the video version, Joshua is now facilitating that. So thank you, Joshua, for doing that. And there's a link on our website for the podcast where you can find that link. I'll also post it in, or I'll try to remember to do it in the videos that I post on YouTube after this video is done. So thank you, Joshua, for doing that. That's really awesome. I know people have asked for that audio version, and Joshua is very kindly making that happen. Stefan says, I've talked in length about unfair criticism you've received as a publisher. Have I talked in length about that? I hope I haven't talked in length about that. I try not to focus on criticism at all, but give me an example, Stefan. I'm curious about what you're talking about. But he says, what's a piece of criticism as a designer that you had trouble letting go? Piece of criticism as a designer that you had trouble letting go. I don't think I'm hanging on to any criticism at all, right? Really. I try to hear constructive criticism and process it, and either have it improve that brand or improve myself as a designer and as a person in the future. So I don't really think I'm holding on to anything that I'm aware of. But let me know if I am. Maybe I bring something up fairly often that I should let go of and I should be aware of. Drew says, I was going to purchase the mats, but it said they're 5% too small. Will proper size versions be coming? Yeah, so we made these neoprene play mats for Wingspan, and somewhere along the manufacturing process, I think the factory basically decided to shrink it by 5%. We don't really know why, but they did. It was an honest mistake. And I missed it in the MPC check of the file. And so we do have these Wingspan neoprene mats as requested by Wingspan fans that are fully functional. I've tested it. They work. They're tight because they are 5% too small, but they do work. And so we're selling them at a 50% discount. So if someone wants those mats, if you just want to try it and see if they work for you, you're welcome to buy them, give them a try. They do function. But we are planning on making more at the normal 100% size. I don't think they'll be ready for about half a year, though. They'll take a while to make and ship. But I think we'll end up making more of them. It's a little disheartening to have a bunch of inventory that people may not want, but well, I'll see how the 5% smaller versions sell, and then I'll make a choice as to how many more we make. Keith says, will there be slight improvements for the second print run of Tapestry? I think I fixed like a typo and a rule clarification, but that's it. I only fixed like little typos and things like that for Tapestry. Improvements is obviously highly subjective, and everything that I wanted in Tapestry was in the original print run, and so we'll just continue to reprint that. Martin says, what about a cardboard tuck box? It's cardboard and recyclable, but not sure on increased cost. Cardboard tuck box. Oh, to hold like decks of cards. I think that you're right that cardboard is better than disposable plastic, but I think that may significantly increase the cost. There's an assembly cost to cardboard when you're assembling a box like that. Kalania says, when it says that the neoprene mat is 5% too small, how much of an impact does it make? Can you show us how it lays out? It's hard for me to show you on camera because I don't have one handy, and it's one of my cats just got out. 1 second. Water. But it's basically the fix to use the neoprene mat because of the size is that you have to move the cards in the top row and the bottom row slightly down and slightly up just to make room for it. And beyond that, they function normally. Amy says, are the Wingspan quick start guides available at retailers or only on StoneMeyerGames.com? They're only available from us. Yeah. Connor says that in terms of the environmentally friendly question, he says a couple games I was given while at Essen have their cards wrapped in a strip of brown, plain brown paper, not waxy. There's no obvious smudge on either the strip or the cards. That's great to hear. I know Panda is looking into it, and I'm hoping to find a solution for it. Tom asked about chocolate of the day, which I'm going back through comments that are probably in the past at this point. So I've mentioned the chocolate of the day. Any food experiences, second breakfast? Yeah, we had a ton of great meals in New Zealand, including the big fig meal that I mentioned a little earlier. And if you go to jamiestegmeyer.com, you can see our 10 favorite meals and photos of them. Jacob says, what's your approach towards apps that help with the onboarding? There's an app called Dized, D-I-Z-E-D, that I think can help people learn games and answer rules questions for games. I love third-party creators doing cool stuff like that. It isn't something that I'm really going to invest in and pursue because of the time and really upfront cost required for creating apps like that. But I love that third-party creators are doing stuff like that. Ferlin says, I saw the Between Two Castles promo number 2 in the store. Where can I get the number 1? That was for one of the reviewers that we did like a Kickstarter promo for, and I think we just don't have them right now. So we might make more in the future, but currently we don't have any. We sent them all to the reviewer. Mary says, oh, Mary just has a nice comment here. I'll keep scrolling looking for questions. Amy says, but what's the best chocolate that you had on your trip? And I would say it is probably the Whitaker's Roasted Supreme Coffee bar. That obviously I brought another one home with because it was so good. Let's see if I have any. So I missed, obviously I was in New Zealand, so I missed Essen Spiel. I was kind of out of the loop for anything that happened there. Was anything big and exciting happened at Essen that you all are excited about? This is the big game convention in Germany every year. I know there were some big releases there, but I'm curious to hear what you were excited about or what you heard about, or if there was any weird news that came out of the convention. My cats continue to open the door. I'm just going to have to close them out for a little bit. All right, guys, you're going out. You're going out. Sorry, I work in an office, and my girlfriend is working. She also works from home in the other room over there. So I try to keep these doors closed out of respect for her work process while I'm on these videos. Lindsay says, are we going to be seeing an Australia-New Zealand bird expansion next? See any cool birds on your trip? I did see tons of cool birds on the trip. I took a lot of photos of those birds. I posted a few of them in the Wingspan Facebook group, and even more I got later. I ended up meeting, 3 kiwis. We had to go out of our way to see kiwis because they're fairly rare now, fairly hard to see, and they're nocturnal. But we did find a way to see a few of the kiwis. And we also saw the wakahe, which is a very rare bird in New Zealand. We went to the Willowbrook Animal Sanctuary in Christchurch, which was awesome to walk through. You just walk through, and it's a little bit like a zoo, but it's also a little bit like a petting zoo and also like a sanctuary. There are lots of birds that are just allowed to wander around in the open. So we encountered a ton of cool birds there. As for the expansion, or an expansion in that area of the world, with that continent, we hope to cover all continents in the future with Wingspan expansions. Mike says, are there any photos of the 2 small Wingspan neoprene playmats so we can see just how tight the cards are? I think there are some in the Wingspan Facebook group. I don't have one readily available, but I'm sure there's some in that group that maybe someone can point to. Jenny says, did I visit any good game stores in New Zealand? I visited a couple game cafes and one store that sells our games. I visited Counterculture in Wellington, Flock in Nelson, and Jake's Hardware in Twizzle. Keith says, did I skydive or bungee jump in New Zealand? We did not. No, we didn't do either of those things. We did do a float trip through a glowworm cave in it wasn't in Rotorua. It was in was kind of near Hobbiton. I'm forgetting the area. Waitotapu, maybe, in the North Island, glowworm caves. And that was really cool. That was kind of an adventurous thing. There were certain points we're in the water in these wetsuits. There's certain points where we have to jump backwards off these waterfalls. And we also took a helicopter up to the Fox Glacier in the South Island of New Zealand, which was awesome. The helicopter ride was really cool. Walking on the glacier was spectacular. Those were the two like main adventurous things that we did. We also went to Hobbiton. We did many, many really, really cool things, but I would say the two like things that are in the category of skydiving and bungee jumping would have been the glowworm cave and the helicopter ride to the glacier. I'm just scrolling down, looking at the comments here. Let me see if I have anything else I need to cover. I've talked about the Swift Start Guide, the neoprene playmats. New Zealand. We also did a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff in New Zealand. Like we went to Weta Workshop, we went to Hobbiton, which I just mentioned, which is absolutely worth going to. It far exceeded my expectations. I highly recommend the evening tour of it that includes the feast. It's a little expensive, but absolutely worth it. And we also went to a ton of Lord of the Rings filming locations in New Zealand. Places that don't really look like they do in the movies now because the sets are gone, but we can still kind of recognize, oh, okay, we think something happened here. We think maybe a certain shot was from here. That was really cool to kind of hunt around for those spots. Chad says, have I trademarked Wingspansion? No, we haven't trademarked that. Just kind of a fun way of saying Wingspan expansion. Mary Angela says, will the Swift Start packs and neoprene mats be available with distributors, or are they Stonemaier stores exclusive? We stay away from the term exclusive at Stonemaier Games, but just based on the cost of making these mats, based on the price at which we want to sell them for the mats and the packs, we're just selling them through our web store. Miles says, no spoilers for recent episodes, but how have I liked Survivor so far? Do I like the Island of the Idols aspect? Yeah, Megan and I have been catching up on Survivor since we got back from New Zealand. We hadn't watched any of the current season yet, but Survivor is one of my favorite shows. And so we've been watching a few of the episodes, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm enjoying it more than I thought. I thought the addition of like the previous survivors and the advice that they're giving, I thought they'd just be giving some advice and that would be it. But the little twists that were added, that I don't want to spoil anything as you mentioned here, but I like the little twists that are added in those conversations. I think that's really neat. And I like kind of the freedom that Rob and Sandra are given during those conversations to rather than having like a strict set of rules to follow. Nicola says, which game will be the next one? Which game? Well, today we're focusing on the Wingspansion. So I don't want to talk about too much about the future. I want to talk about the present today, which is that we have the Wingspansion, the Swift Start pack, and the Wingspan neoprene mats, and the Wingspan focused charity auction. Lots of stuff in our e-newsletter today. And if you want to check out our e-newsletter, you can kind of see some of the games that we're working on and products that we're working on under code names. But yeah, that'll give you a hint at what's coming up next. Maddie says, when pitching games to publishers, do I prefer to be the only publisher being pitched to at a given time, or do I think it's okay to reach out to other publishers while you're still being considered by one or the other? I totally think it's fine to reach out to more than one publisher at the time. I don't mind that happening. I think the only way I would mind it is if we decided, hey, we will actually want you to send us a prototype and we're going to take the time to learn and play that prototype. And then we do that and we say, we want the game, and you come back to us and say, sorry, but someone else is going to take the game. Because then we've kind of just wasted our time spending that much time like learning and playtesting or playing the game at that point. So some level of transparency, I think, is important at the point where you would actually send a prototype to a publisher. And to say, hey, we're also sending this prototype to 3 other publishers, and we might accept their offers if we hear from them. which is fair to say. I think that level of transparency is totally fine, but at least then the publisher then has that information to go by. Amin from Morocco says, is it possible to make a worker placement game using only cards? That's what I'm trying to do currently because I'm trying to make the game as cheap as possible. Yes, I think it actually is possible if you use the method shown in Gugong. Check out Gugong for how they use cards as essentially as workers. And there's another game too. I think maybe Troyes, Troyes. I think it uses cards as workers. There's also, in a way, this uses cards as workers. Not exactly, but check out Tribune. Tribune kind of uses cards as workers. Connor says, after your trip, what was more sore, your legs from all the hiking or your face from all the smiling? Probably, actually, I mean, both of those were sore, but there's a very long flight from New Zealand, like a 14-hour flight on the way back. And my back and neck were a little sore from that flight. So I'll say that. But and we did a lot of hiking. Yeah, we did a ton of hiking, but I wasn't all that sore from it. Like my feet were a little sore from the hiking, but not my legs. Ian says, is shipping meant to mean -2 for the UK Wingspan European expansion? No, should not be -2. -$2. Why would that be? Not quite sure about that. I appreciate, Ian, you pointing that out. I might have to make a quick adjustment here on the fly because I think I know what's happening. I think the UK shipping price is $8, but the yeah, I think that's it. But the international champion discount is $10. I think is what is happening here. So I'll just change the UK shipping rate so that we don't lose money on every shipment to the UK, which would not make sense. Okay, yeah, I think that's what's happening. Yep. Yeah, I'll have to fix that. Thank you for letting me know. I'll fix that right now. And everyone in the UK can now curse you, Ian, for finding this mistake. All right, it's fixed now. Chad says, have I been getting a crazy amount of Bobo calls lately? Oh, robocalls. I don't know what a Bobo call is. Chad says he's received 12 robocalls since Monday. Wow, that's a lot. Chad says, what can Stonemaier Games do to combat this? I have no idea. I don't think we have an impact on that, but that is a problem. I would recommend not answering the phone if you see a number that you don't know, because I think once you do that, they know that they have a number that they can call again. And watch the Last Week Tonight segment on robocalls. There's a great video. It's probably on YouTube still about that, and they can show you, I think, some things that you can do to help prevent robocalls from happening. Joshua says, I'm sure you don't want to spoil, but is your open world sandbox game going to coincide with your game set in Japan? If so, take all my money. No, the open world is a new world. It's not related to anything on Earth. Yeah. Matthew says, by the looks of it, the European expansion won't add game length. Is that a goal for Elizabeth and Stonemaier to maintain the roughly 40 to 70 minute playtime, or will future expansions possibly add game length? It's hard to say at this point. I would say it is pretty much our goal to maintain the same length of the game. That we want to maintain the same feel of Wingspan, even as we add expansions. We want to make it just as easy as possible to have the Wingspan experience every time you play Wingspan, no matter which combination of expansions or components you're playing with. Yeah. Okay, here's a question from Dusty about Reavers of Midgard. He says it was recently delivered, but with some issues. The insert was repeatedly poor quality, and cardstock, which was supposed to be upgraded due to stretch goals, was not. Gray Fox is replacing inserts, but will not honor the upgraded linen cardstock. Reddit is talking about whether this will affect other Kickstarter campaigns. Could this start a trend, or really probably only affect Gray Fox games? I don't know a lot about that issue other than, in fact, I don't know anything other than what you just wrote here. I don't think it would impact other Kickstarter campaigns, but it probably will impact Gray Fox, if that's the case. Yeah, it'll probably impact Gray Fox in some way in terms of how their fans or potential fans perceive their brand, unfortunately. I do understand. I do understand the idea of a Kickstarter creator attempting to make something and having something go wrong, and not entirely replacing it. I know that isn't ideal. That isn't the ideal thing to say, but I think some mistakes matter more than others, and they can have a huge impact on a company and the environment, really, if you are reprinting something that doesn't really matter all that much. So while I think it's great for a company to keep their promises, card stock, I would say, is not at the top of that list. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I would, as a customer, I would try to be forgiving of a company that decides not to proceed with that. If it was their intent to really go forward with it and somehow it didn't happen, maybe a factory mistake, maybe a communication mistake, I don't think I would begrudge them for that. I think there are bigger things to be upset about in the world. Montgomery says, which is better, cats or dogs, and why is it dogs? For me, it's obviously cats. I love dogs too, but I adore my cats. Stefan says, the unfair publisher criticism was in reference to accusations that I intentionally printed too few copies of Wingspan to create artificial hype scarcity. Yeah, that one I haven't even thought of in a long time, just because it's a ridiculous claim that I would make too few games rather than games that I could actually sell. So I haven't thought about that one in quite some time. That was just a weird one. I think the type of criticism that I actually think about is valid criticism, criticism that actually makes some sort of logical sense, whereas that one doesn't. Sean says, how about Stonemaier rubber bands? We actually do, we don't make Stonemaier branded rubber bands, but we do make latex-free rubber bands. That's the version of rubber bands that we use in our games if we ever need to include rubber bands in them, which is very rare nowadays. I don't think we put rubber bands in many of our games. Oh, but you're saying, Sean, for packaging the cards, you're going back to the environmental discussion of not using shrink wrap on decks of cards. We could do that. The one problem with rubber bands is over time they get dry and they break. And they are flexible. So if cards, you want everything packed pretty tight in the box, in the game box, so that things don't shift around in shipping. Because sometimes the game will ship directly to a consumer. Other times it might might sit on a shelf for a long time, and then things can shift around in the box, and that's when issues can happen. Anthony says, almost all Stonemaier games are on Tabletopia except Tapestry. Is there a plan to get it on Tabletopia soon? Yes, I hope so. They are just working on scanning in the miniatures, the landmarks, because there are no digital files for them. They're all hand created. So Tabletopia is working on that, and I should get an update about that. I don't think I have an update. I'll make a note about that. Tabletopia Tapestry. Yeah, they haven't updated me on that in a little bit, so I'll see what's going on there. Amin says, what's my opinion on the game Chocolate Factory? I did get my Kickstarter version very recently of Chocolate Factory. I love chocolate. I love engine building, but I haven't played it yet. I've been to New Zealand the last couple of weeks. In fact, I have a lot of games on my shelf that I haven't played, and New Zealand is not an excuse for any of them. Ivan says, did I have a nice time on my trip to New Zealand? And yes, Ivan, I had a delightful time in New Zealand, a really, really wonderful, special, memorable time there. It was definitely worth the trip. Let's see. Ben clarifies why Toma Caves were the glowworm caves that I went to in the North Island of New Zealand. Waitomo Caves. Travis says, I saw that between the last newsletter and today's newsletter, the ETA for the release of the second Wingspan expansion has been moved up from 2021 to 2020. It was actually just a typo in the last newsletter. It should have been 2020, not 2021. It was literally just a typo. I don't even know for sure that it'll be in 2020. Our goal is to release one expansion a year, but we want to make sure we get it right before we do that. And Elizabeth is, I think she can say that she's far busier this year than maybe she thought she would be as a result of Wingspan's success and other factors. Bojan says, has New Zealand inspired any new game ideas, themes, or mechanisms? I wouldn't necessarily say so. It was visually beautiful, and that maybe it'll have a subconscious impact on my how I visually approach games. I did get to play a few games while I was there, not many, but we played Star Realms on the ferry between the North Island and the South Ferry. I played Hobbit Love Letter, which I posted a video about yesterday, and we played some Just One at Counterculture in Wellington. So a few games. I don't think they'll have a big impact on my game design, but it was cool. The Hobbit Love Letter was really cool to play, and Star Realms I continue to just have a great time with. I think it's a great game, great two-player game. Al says, I'd love to visit New Zealand, but I'm not sure I could handle the long flight. How long was it? It was 13 hours there from Houston to New Zealand, and then 14 hours back from Auckland to Chicago. It is a long flight. It's a tough one. I really struggled on the way there because I really tried to sleep and I couldn't sleep. I had a hard time sleeping just based on the time zones and the comfort. But the one nice thing is that the flight wasn't full. And so between Megan and I, we had 3 seats between the two of us. Some people had entire rows to themselves. So if you maybe go during an off season, like a spring or summer, spring there right now, or not summer, or fall, you might have good luck getting several seats in your row that you could use to lay down in and relax and actually have a pleasant flight. Marco says, can we have more news about your Sand and Cape games? Those are code names on our e-newsletter. I appreciate the interest, but no, I'm not going to talk about them at this point. Annika says that my sister-in-law is going to have a baby today, so that's wonderful. I knew that was coming up really soon. I didn't realize it was happening today, but that is wonderful to hear that that I'm going to have a new niece or nephew in maybe just a few hours. Justin brought up, I mentioned, someone earlier asked about worker placement games that use only cards, and Justin brought up Oh My Goods as an example of that too. Thank you, Justin. Wang says, with regard to print runs, is there an aggregating resource for allocating units and determining cost? An example I've heard is 3 to 5% for replacement parts and damaged copies, but I assume there's also theft and other events that you must mitigate against. I would recommend having like a 10% buffer if you're fulfilling games, because anything can go wrong during the fulfillment process. You don't need full complete games though for replacement parts. Usually your manufacturer will send you just a bunch of loose parts that you can use for replacement parts. So you don't actually need full games for that. You just have a bunch of parts that you can, it's like spare parts that you can use. But it's really just the weird random stuff that can happen during fulfillment, whether it's a fulfillment issue or an issue that maybe you miscalculated something, and that 10% buffer, a buffer never hurts. So it always helps to have a substantial buffer there. In my opinion, I've always been happy when I've had a buffer, and I've always struggled when I didn't put into place a proper buffer. Sam says, in a game with an open market such as Wingspan or Suburbia, how many cards or tiles in the market do I think is too many? It will often depend on the game, but is there a point of information overload? If there's just one market in the game, I would say 3 to 5 cards can work. I usually like the 3 sweet spot. For some reason, that works really well for me. But if you have more than one market in the game, I would definitely say max of 3 per market. That's highly subjective, but that's my opinion. Christopher says that he's interested in becoming a Stonemaier champion. Will Stonemaier Games have a presence at PAX South in January? We won't. No, we don't go to many conventions. We might have some ambassadors there. Ambassadors are people who volunteer for Stonemaier Games and kind of help welcome people into the Stonemaier community by going to different conventions, but Stonemaier itself does not go to many conventions. David says, are you looking to have the workers actually be, David's asking a clarification about the worker placement game with cards that was asked earlier. Cody says, are there any plans for Wingspan upgrades? Perhaps a more sturdy bird feeder? If you are having troubles with your bird feeder, just add a touch of glue. I've glued the base of mine, and it's been very, very sturdy ever since I added the glue. So a touch of glue can go a long way. There's also Tower Rex makes a bird feeder, a nice wooden bird feeder that you can use. They can buy on Etsy. It's not all that expensive. We don't have any plans to do Stonemaier specific accessories or upgrades, but a lot of third-party companies like Tower Rex, Maple Source, Top Shelf Gamer, they make premium upgrade resources for our games and a variety of other games that you can check out. David says, is there a reason that Charterstone has remained out of print? Not a big reason, other than I think we made maybe too many in the original print run, and it took a while, not for us to sell them, but for other vendors to sell out of their copies. But we are starting to reprint now. So there will be, Charterstone will be back in stock, probably coinciding with the release of the digital version next year. Steve has a little story here, not a question, but I'm going to read it. He says, a group came in to play Tapestry at the game store I work at, and they put all the landmarks directly on the individual tracks, so the first person to reach them just grabbed them from the tracks. I thought it was a cool presentation and brought the landmarks closer to the board during the game and looked great. That was actually the original intent. That was how we play tested it throughout playtesting. But when we got to the final board stage, I realized that from different angles, those landmarks blocked people's view of the actions, the benefits on the board, on the tracks. And so we moved them off the board onto that separate landmark mat. So, but you can do that. If it doesn't bother you, you're welcome to put them on the tracks themselves. Nick says, how do I decide on the code names you use for your in-development games? I kind of just make them up. Yeah, I kind of just think of something that's a little vague but a little sneaky, and I just write it down. Wang says, is there a resource you direct people towards who are interested in balancing via spreadsheets? I'm not aware of an existing resource. No, I think you kind of have to build your own, and it really depends heavily on the game. Kent says, has Megan played all of the currently released Stonemaier games, and does she have a favorite? I've been asked this before, and I always forget the answer. I think she has now played all of the games. Does she have a favorite? Maybe she would say Between Two Castles or Wingspan. I'll have to get her answer for that. I know she's told me, and I've forgotten it. Mike says, I found that the launch day for a new Kickstarter is the most stressful day for me. Are the days you open pre-orders stressful for you at all? Much less stressful than a Kickstarter launch day, but yes, they're still stressful. It's mostly a lot of little busy work. Like right now, I have about 70 emails in my inbox from champions whose promo code didn't work in some way, or they forgot to enter the promo code, so I have to go in and manually update their order. But it's not too bad. That's the main thing. Just saw something that I need to look into real quick related to. Okay, I see what I did here. Okay, got it fixed. Okay, sorry about that. Tim says, thoughts on an expansion to take Wingspan from 5 players to 6. So originally we were hoping to make Wingspan a 6-player game with the expansion, but we got so much feedback from players saying that 5 players sometimes made the game a little bit too long, that we didn't want to go into up to 6 unless we had a mechanism specifically to speed up the game at 6 players, which we don't currently have. So maybe someday we'll do that. For now, if you really want to play with 6, you can do so. You'll just need to get one of the neoprene play mats and use that as the 6-player mat, and everything, and use like a few cubes of a different color. But it is playable. It just takes a little bit longer. I think I played a game in like maybe 90 minutes. It may have gone up to 2 hours with 6 players in the game that I played, but it was a teaching game. The Dice Odyssey popped in to say, so glad that we got to go to New Zealand. How did it go? It was awesome. Did you see a ton of sheep there? Yes, so many sheep everywhere, as well as cows and elk and goats, and what am I missing? Very few chickens. We saw a few chickens, but very few. Also, please tell me that you did a native had a native Kiwi to do a haka dance for you. We actually missed that. That was maybe one of the few things that we missed was kind of the Maori cultural experience, which we didn't really get. We probably should have. I think we thought maybe we find it on the South Island, but it was more prevalent on the North Island. We should have taken the opportunities then to do it. Kalania says, do I have plans for a Tapestry expansion in the future? Yes, yeah, we're actually currently working on it. The most common reviewer con remark for the game is the lack of impact of the landmarks. Any plans to make them more unique in a future expansion? So I have heard that feedback. The reason for the thing that people have asked for is, why don't landmarks give you an ongoing ability? And the reason is thematically, landmarks represent that you are the first to do something. They aren't an actual functioning building. They're more like a monument that you were the first person to open a tavern in the world. You have the first tavern. But also, on a mechanical perspective, we found that giving players ongoing things to remember and keep track of during the game, really, my cats are being feisty, sorry. They were really hard for players to remember. Any ongoing things were hard for players to remember. And so that's why we didn't give the ability. That's the other reason why we didn't give the landmarks an ongoing ability. So I do have a little thing that I'm trying with the expansion that addresses that a little bit, but I think if someone is looking for all landmarks in the game to always have some ongoing ability for each player, that's not going to happen. It just doesn't work. You're welcome to try it at home. Give each landmark an ongoing ability and see how easily you forget to use that ability. It doesn't work well. But I'm adding a few little twists on landmarks. Yeah, a few little things. Chad says, were the cats upset for me being away for so long? They've been a little extra feisty. Yeah, we're trying to figure out what's going on with the cats. In fact, even just during this live cast, they've been far more feisty than they have in previous live casts. Joe says, any update on how many orders so far? People still have time. We still have copies of the Wingspansion in stock, so you're still good. Miles says, how am I feeling about my 49ers, the NFL team that I follow and support? I feel pretty good. I mean, they're undefeated. They're the only undefeated team. I'm sure they won't go through the whole season undefeated. That's very, very difficult to do. But and you're right, there's a big game coming up against Seattle, Miles's team, next week. That'll be a huge game. I'm impressed that NFL predicted that and put it on Monday night. So we'll see what happens then, Miles. Good luck to the Seahawks. Jake says, is there an update on the Stonemaier Champion shirt poll? There is, that you'll get on the Stonemaier Champion update e-newsletter. I don't want to talk about that just in general because that will only impact Stonemaier Champions. Carol says, what's it like being a designer during the playtesting process? I started playtesting games and was curious what it's like for a designer to have to correct and let their game evolve based on feedback. Mixed emotions? I don't know. I like getting feedback on our games when I ask for feedback. I mean, that's the best time that I want to get feedback. That's what playtesting is for. So what is it like being a designer though? I mean, I always want my game to be fun and functional and intuitive and all that stuff and interesting. But it's during the playtest process that I know that's not always true. I go into it knowing that's not always true, and that I go into it knowing that there are improvements to be made. And so I guess it sucks a little bit when you get feedback from someone who just doesn't enjoy the game. But I try to work with playtesters that give constructive feedback really well. So I've kind of weeded out playtesters that just say things like, this sucks. And they don't share an example or tell why or tell what about it isn't fun. And so that type of feedback was hard to hear. But I've kind of weeded out those playtesters, and I focus now on playtesters who are really good at giving constructive feedback that is example driven, and that I can actually act on. Specific example driven. Joe says, on the Kickstarter front, shipping feels like it has been continuing to go higher and higher on projects. Do I think a stretch goal to reduce shipping would be feasible? No, I don't think stretch goals impact shipping at all, because stretch goals might reduce the economies of scale of production, but shipping more games doesn't really decrease the cost of shipping each individual game. So I don't think a stretch goal would have an impact on that at all. Or I don't think it would be a good idea for a creator to do that. They would just be losing money at that point. Marcel says, any story-driven games coming from Stonemaier in the future, or do I have one that you are particularly waiting from other publishers? We do have Charterstone and The Rise of Fenris for Scythe, both of which have a decent amount of story to them. I think maybe you're talking about heavy written narrative. I've enjoyed Legacy of Dragonholt, which is one that you can check out if you enjoy story-driven games. There's one that I backed on Kickstarter that I'm forgetting the name of right now that I think it is fairly story-driven. It's from the company that made Chronicles of Crime. They did another game on Kickstarter fairly recently that I think has a fair amount of story to it that I think should be pretty cool. Hector says, hey, Jamie, I was checking out the custom auction page on Board Game Geek and noticed that there might be a little typo in the description of number 6. Number 6 might have the wrong creator. Thank you for letting me know. I will check that out. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll check that out as soon as I log off this live chat. I'm sure there are typos on it. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, it definitely looks like there's a typo there, and I'll fix that. Let me see if there are any other quick questions before I sign off here. The Dice Odyssey says, did the Sideways movie also influence your idea of actually creating the game or developing it at all? In terms of viticulture, maybe a little bit. I think the movie does a good idea of romanticizing the winery, the vineyard visitation process. So maybe it had a subconscious impact on my viticulture design. Josh says, is there a game mechanism I find to be tricky to implement personally? Combat, I think, is always really difficult to design. Wendy says, I personally enjoy that your games don't have a ton of negative player interaction. I'm glad you included negative on there. I think a lot of people associate player interaction with, they think of combat, but there's a lot of positive player interaction that can also happen in games. Did I design your games to specifically avoid take that? And yes, I do. I try to avoid direct conflict in our games as much as possible. Okay, I want to go check this typo and fix it as soon as possible. And I do have a bunch of emails about orders that have been placed that have been coming through. But thank you so much for joining me on this week's live chat. It will be on YouTube for viewing later. It'll still be on Facebook too. And Joshua, as I mentioned earlier, is going to turn it into an audio podcast version for people to download and listen to as a podcast that they want. So thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions, just let me know on social media. I'm happy to answer there. Thanks. Have a good week.